The Book of Dragons by E. Nesbit. Story 5. The Island of the Nine Whirlpools. The dark arch that led to the witch's cave was hung with a black and yellow fringe of live snakes. As the queen went in, keeping carefully in the middle of the arch, all the snakes lifted their wicked, flat heads and stared at her with their wicked, yellow eyes. You know it is not good manners to stare, even at royalty, except of course for cats. And the snakes had been so badly brought up that they even put their tongues out at the poor lady. Nasty, thin, sharp tongues they were too. Now, the queen's husband was, of course, the king. And besides being a king he was an enchanter, and considered to be quite at the top of his profession. So he was very wise, and he knew that when kings and queens want children, the queen always goes to see a witch. So he gave the queen the witch's address, and the queen called on her, though she was very frightened and did not like it at all. The witch was sitting by a fire of sticks, stirring something bubbly in a shiny copper cauldron. "What do you want, my dear?" she said to the queen. "Oh, if you please," said the queen, "I want a baby, a very nice one. We don't want any expense spared. My husband said." "Oh, yes," said the witch. "I know all about him. And so you want a child? Do you know it will bring you sorrow?" "It will bring me joy first," said the queen. "Great sorrow," said the witch. "Greater joy," said the queen. Then the witch said, "Well, have your own way. I suppose it's as much as your place is worth to go back without it." "The king would be very much annoyed," said the poor queen. "Well, well," said the witch. "What will you give me for the child?" "Anything you ask for, and all I have," said the queen. "Then give me your gold crown." The queen took it off quickly. "And your necklace of blue sapphires." The queen unfastened it. "And your pearl bracelets." The queen unclasped them. "And your ruby clasps." And the queen undid the clasps. "Now the lilies from your breast." The queen gathered together the lilies. "And the diamonds of your little bright shoe buckles." The queen pulled off her shoes. Then the witch stirred the stuff that was in the cauldron, and one by one, she threw in the gold crown and the sapphire necklace and the pearl bracelets and the ruby clasps and the diamonds of the little bright shoe buckles, and last of all she threw in the lilies. The stuff in the cauldron boiled up in foaming flashes of yellow and blue and red and white and silver, and sent out a sweet scent, and presently the witch poured it out into a pot and set it to cool in the doorway among the snakes. Then she said to the queen, "Your child will have hair as golden as your crown, eyes as blue as your sapphires. The red of your rubies will lie on its lips, and its skin will be clear and pale as your pearls. Its soul will be white and sweet as your lilies, and your diamonds will be no clearer than its wits." "Oh, thank you," said the queen, "and when will it come?" "You will find it when you get home." "And won't you have something for yourself?" asked the queen. "Any little thing you fancy. Would you like a country, or a sack of jewels?" "Nothing, thank you," said the witch. "I could make more diamonds in a day than I should wear in a year." "Well, but do let me do some little thing for you," the queen went on. "Aren't you tired of being a witch? Wouldn't you like to be a duchess or a princess, or something like that?" "There is one thing I should rather like," said the witch, "but it's hard to get in my trade." "Oh, tell me what," said the queen. "I should like someone to love me," said the witch. Then the queen threw her arms around the witch's neck and kissed her 100 times. "Why," she said, "I love you better than my life. You've given me the baby, and the baby shall love you too." "Perhaps it will," said the witch, "and when the sorrow comes, send for me. Each of your 50 kisses will be a spell to bring me to you. Now, drink up your medicine, there's a dear, and run along home." So the queen drank the stuff in the pot, which was quite cool by this time, and she went out under the fringe of snakes, and they all behaved like good Sunday school children. Some of them even tried to drop a curtsy to her as she went by, though that is not easy when you are hanging wrong way up by your tail. But the snakes knew the queen was friends with their mistress, so, of course, they had to do their best to be civil. When the queen got home, sure enough there was the baby lying in the cradle with the royal arms blazoned on it, crying as naturally as possible. It had pink ribbons to tie up its sleeves, so the queen saw at once it was a girl. When the king knew this, he tore his black hair with fury. "Oh, you silly, silly queen," he said. "Why didn't I marry a clever lady? Did you think I went to all the trouble and expense of sending you to a witch to get a girl? You knew well enough it was a boy I wanted, a boy, an heir, a prince, to learn all my magic and my enchantments, and to rule the kingdom after me. I'll bet a crown, my crown," he said, "you never even thought to tell the witch what kind you wanted. Did you now?" And the queen hung her head and had to confess that she had only asked for a child. "Very well, madam," said the king, "very well, have your own way. And make the most of your daughter, while she is a child?" The queen did. All the years of her life had never held half so much happiness as now lived in each of the moments when she held her little baby in her arms. And the years went on, and the king grew more and more clever at magic, and more disagreeable at home, and the princess grew more beautiful, and more dear every day she lived. The queen and the princess were feeding the goldfish in the courtyard fountains with crumbs of the princess's 18th birthday cake, when the king came into the courtyard, looking as black as thunder, with his black raven hopping after him. He shook his fist at his family, as indeed he generally did whenever he met them, for he was not a king with pretty home manners. The raven sat down on the edge of the marble basin and tried to peck the goldfish. It was all he could do to show that he was in the same temper as his master. "A girl indeed," said the king angrily. "I wonder you can dare to look me in the face, when you remember how your silliness has spoiled everything." "You oughtn't to speak to my mother like that," said the princess. She was 18. And it came to her suddenly and all in a moment that she was a grown-up, so she spoke out. The king could not utter a word for several minutes. He was too angry. But the queen said, "My dear child, don't interfere," quite crossly, for she was frightened. And to her husband she said, "My dear, why do you go on worrying about it? Our daughter is not a boy. It is true, but she may marry a clever man who could rule your kingdom after you, and learn as much magic as ever you cared to teach him." Then the king found his tongue. "If she does marry," he said, slowly, "her husband will have to be a very clever man, oh, yes, very clever indeed. And he will have to know a very great deal more magic than I shall ever care to teach him." The queen knew at once by the king's tone that he was going to be disagreeable. "Ah," she said, "don't punish the child because she loves her mother." "I'm not going to punish her for that," said he. "I'm only going to teach her to respect her father." And without another word he went off to his laboratory and worked all night, boiling different colored things in crucibles, and copying charms in curious twisted letters from old brown books with mold stains on their yellowy pages. The next day his plan was all arranged. He took the poor princess to the lone tower, which stands on an island in the sea, 1,000 miles from everywhere. He gave her a dowry, and settled a handsome income on her. He engaged a competent dragon to look after her, and also a respectable griffin whose birth and upbringing he knew all about. And he said, "Here you shall stay, my dear, respectful daughter, till the clever man comes to marry you. He'll have to be clever enough to sail a ship through the 9 whirlpools that spin around the island, and to kill the dragon and the griffin. Till he comes you'll never get any older or any wiser. No doubt he will soon come. You can employ yourself in embroidering your wedding gown. I wish you joy, my dutiful child." And his carriage, drawn by lithe thunderbolts, thunder travels very fast, rose in the air and disappeared, and the poor princess was left, with the dragon and the griffin, on the island of the 9 whirlpools. The queen, left at home, cried for a day and a night, and then she remembered the witch and called to her. And the witch came, and the queen told her all. "For the sake of the twice 25 kisses you gave me," said the witch, "I will help you. But it is the last thing I can do, and it is not much. Your daughter is under a spell, and I can take you to her. But, if I do, you will have to be turned to stone, and to stay so till the spell is taken off the child." "I would be a stone for 1,000 years, said the poor queen, "if at the end of them I could see my dear again." So the witch took the queen in a carriage drawn by lithe sunbeams, which travel more quickly than anything else in the world, and much quicker than thunder, and so away and away to the lone tower on the island of the 9 whirlpools. And there was the princess, sitting on the floor in the best room of the lone tower, crying as if her heart would break, and the dragon and the griffin were sitting primly on each side of her. "Oh, mother, mother, mother," she cried, and hung around the queen's neck as if she would never let go. "Now," said the witch, when they had all cried as much as was good for them, "I can do 1 or 2 other little things for you. Time shall not make the princess sad. All days will be like one day till her deliverer comes. And you and I, dear queen, will sit in stone at the gate of the tower. In doing this for you I lose all my witch's powers, and when I say the spell that changes you to stone, I shall change with you, and if ever we come out of the stone, I shall be a witch no more, but only a happy old woman." Then the 3 kissed one another again and again, and the witch said the spell, and on each side of the door there was now a stone lady. One of them had a stone crown on its head and a stone scepter in its hand, but the other held a stone tablet with words on it, which the griffin and the dragon could not read, though they had both had a very good education. And now all days seemed like one day to the princess, and the next day always seemed the day when her mother would come out of the stone and kiss her again. And the years went slowly by. The wicked king died, and someone else took his kingdom, and many things were changed in the world, but the island did not change, nor the 9 whirlpools, nor the griffin, nor the dragon, nor the 2 stone ladies. And all the time, from the very first, the day of the princess's deliverance was coming, creeping nearer, and nearer, and nearer. But no one saw it coming except the princess, and she only in dreams. And the years went by in 10s and in 100s, and still the 9 whirlpools spun around, roaring in triumph the story of many a good ship that had gone down in their swirl, bearing with it some prince who had tried to win the princess and her dowry. And the great sea knew all the other stories of the princes who had come from very far, and had seen the whirlpools, and had shaken their wise young heads and said, "'Bout ship," and gone discreetly home to their nice, safe, comfortable kingdoms. But no one told the story of the deliverer who was to come. And the years went by. Now, after more scores of years than you would like to add up on your slate, a certain sailor boy sailed on the high seas with his uncle, who was a skilled skipper. And the boy could reef a sail and coil a rope and keep the ship's nose steady before the wind. And he was as good a boy as you would find in a month of Sundays, and worthy to be a prince. Now there is something which is wiser than all the world, and it knows when people are worthy to be princes. And this something came from the farther side of the seventh world, and whispered in the boy's ear. And the boy heard, though he did not know he heard, and he looked out over the black sea with the white foam horses galloping over it, and far away he saw a light. And he said to the skipper, his uncle, "What light is that?" Then the skipper said, "All good things defend you, Nigel, from sailing near that light. It is not mentioned in all charts, but it is marked in the old chart I steer by, which was my father's fathers before me, and his father's fathers before him. It is the light that shines from the lone tower that stands above the 9 whirlpools. And when my father's father was young he heard from the very old man, his great-great-grandfather, that in that tower an enchanted princess, fairer than the day, waits to be delivered. But there is no deliverance, so never steer that way, and think no more of the princess, for that is only an idle tale. But the whirlpools are quite real." So, of course, from that day Nigel thought of nothing else. And as he sailed hither and thither upon the high seas he saw from time to time the light that shone out to sea across the wild swirl of the 9 whirlpools. And one night, when the ship was at anchor and the skipper asleep in his bunk, Nigel launched the ship's boat and steered alone over the dark sea towards the light. He dared not go very near till daylight should show him what, indeed, were the whirlpools he had to dread. But when the dawn came he saw the lone tower standing dark against the pink and primrose of the east, and about its base the sullen swirl of black water, and he heard the wonderful roar of it. So he hung off and on, all that day and for 6 days besides. And when he had watched 7 days he knew something. For you are certain to know something if you give for 7 days your whole thought to it, even though it be only the first declension, or the 9 times table, or the dates of the Norman kings. What he knew was this, that for 5 minutes out of the 1440 minutes that make up a day the whirlpools slipped into silence, while the tide went down and left the yellow sand bare. And every day this happened, but every day it was 5 minutes earlier than it had been the day before. He made sure of this by the ship's chronometer, which he had thoughtfully brought with him. So on the 8th day, at 5 minutes before noon, Nigel got ready. And when the whirlpools suddenly stopped whirling and the tide sank, like water in a basin that has a hole in it, he stuck to his oars and put his back into his stroke, and presently beached the boat on the yellow sand. Then he dragged it into a cave, and sat down to wait. By 5 minutes and 1 second past noon, the whirlpools were black and busy again, and Nigel peeped out of his cave. And on the rocky ledge overhanging the sea he saw a princess as beautiful as the day, with golden hair and a green gown, and he went out to meet her. "I've come to save you," he said. "How darling and beautiful you are. You are very good, and very clever, and very dear," said the princess, smiling and giving him both her hands. He shut a little kiss in each hand before he let them go. So now, when the tide is low again, I will take you away in my boat, he said. But what about the dragon and the griffin? Asked the princess. Dear me, said Nigel. I didn't know about them. I suppose I can kill them. Don't be a silly boy, said the princess, pretending to be very grown up, for, though she had been on the island time only knows how many years, she was just 18, and she still liked pretending. You haven't a sword, or a shield, or anything. Well, don't the beasts ever go to sleep? Why, yes, said the princess, but only once in 24 hours, and then the dragon is turned to stone. But the griffin has dreams. The griffin sleeps at tea time every day, but the dragon sleeps every day for 5 minutes, and every day it is 3 minutes later than it was the day before. What time does he sleep today? Asked Nigel. At 11, said the princess. Ah, said Nigel, can you do sums? No, said the princess sadly. I was never good at them. Then I must, said Nigel. I can, but it's slow work, and it makes me very unhappy. It'll take me days and days. Don't begin yet, said the princess. You'll have plenty of time to be unhappy when I'm not with you. Tell me all about yourself. So he did. And then she told him all about herself. I know I've been here a long time, she said, but I don't know what time is. And I am very busy sewing silk flowers on a golden gown for my wedding day. And the griffin does the housework, his wings are so convenient and feathery for sweeping and dusting. And the dragon does the cooking, he's hot inside, so, of course, it's no trouble to him. And though I don't know what time is, I'm sure it's time for my wedding day, because my golden gown only wants one more white daisy on the sleeve, and a lily on the bosom of it, and then it will be ready. Just then they heard a dry, rustling clatter on the rocks above them and a snorting sound. It's the dragon, said the princess hurriedly. Goodbye. Be a good boy, and get your sum done. And she ran away, and left him to his arithmetic. Now, the sum was this: if the whirlpools stop and the tide goes down once in every 24 hours, and they do it 5 minutes earlier every 24 hours, and if the dragon sleeps every day, and he does it 3 minutes later every day, in how many days and at what time in the day will the tide go down 3 minutes before the dragon falls asleep? It is quite a simple sum. As you see, you could do it in a minute because you have been to a good school and have taken pains with your lessons, but it was quite otherwise with poor Nigel. He sat down to work out his sum with a piece of chalk on a smooth stone. He tried it by practice and the unitary method, by multiplication, and by rule of 3 3/4. He tried it by decimals and by compound interest. He tried it by square root and by cube root. He tried it by addition, simple and otherwise, and he tried it by mixed examples in vulgar fractions. But it was all of no use. Then he tried to do the sum by algebra, by simple and by quadratic equations, by trigonometry, by logarithms, and by conic sections. But it would not do. He got an answer every time, it is true, but it was always a different one, and he could not feel sure which answer was right. And just as he was feeling how much more important than anything else it is to be able to do your sums, the princess came back. And now it was getting dark. Why, you've been 7 hours over that sum, she said, and you haven't done it yet. Look here, this is what is written on the tablet of the statue by the lower gate. It has figures in it. Perhaps it is the answer to the sum. She held out to him a big white magnolia leaf. and she had scratched on it with the pin of her pearl brooch, and it had turned brown where she had scratched it, as magnolia leaves will do. Nigel read. After 9 days. T2. 24. T2. 27 on. P.S. And the griffin is artificial. Ah, he clapped his hands softly. Dear princess, he said, I know that's the right answer. It says R2, you see. But I'll just prove it. So he hastily worked the sum backward in decimals and equations and conic sections, and all the rules he could think of. And it came right every time. So now we must wait, said he. And they waited. And every day the princess came to see Nigel and brought him food cooked by the dragon, and he lived in his cave, and talked to her when she was there, and thought about her when she was not, and they were both as happy as the longest day in summer. Then at last came the day. Nigel and the princess laid their plans. You're sure he won't hurt you, my only treasure? Said Nigel. Quite, said the princess. I only wish I were half as sure that he wouldn't hurt you. My princess, he said tenderly, 2 great powers are on our side, the power of love and the power of arithmetic. Those 2 are stronger than anything else in the world. So when the tide began to go down, Nigel and the princess ran out onto the sands, and there, in full sight of the terrace where the dragon kept watch, Nigel took his princess in his arms and kissed her. The griffin was busy sweeping the stairs of the lone tower, but the dragon saw, and he gave a cry of rage, and it was like 20 engines all letting off steam at the top of their voices inside Cannon Street Station. And the 2 lovers stood looking up at the dragon. He was dreadful to look at. His head was white with age, and his beard had grown so long that he caught his claws in it as he walked. His wings were white with the salt that had settled on them from the spray of the sea. His tail was long and thick and jointed and white, and had little legs to it, any number of them, far too many, so that it looked like a very large fat silkworm, and his claws were as long as lessons and as sharp as bayonets. Goodbye, love, cried Nigel, and ran out across the yellow sand toward the sea. He had one end of a cord tied to his arm. The dragon was clambering down the face of the cliff, and next moment he was crawling and writhing and sprawling and wriggling across the beach after Nigel, making great holes in the sand with his heavy feet, and the very end of his tail, where there were no legs, made, as it dragged, a mark in the sand such as you make when you launch a boat, and he breathed fire till the wet sand hissed again, and the water of the little rock pools got quite frightened, and all went off in steam. Still Nigel held on and the dragon after him. The princess could see nothing for the steam, and she stood crying bitterly, but still holding on tight with her right hand to the other end of the cord that Nigel had told her to hold, while with her left she held the ship's chronometer, and looked at it through her tears as he had bidden her look, so as to know when to pull the rope. On went Nigel over the sand, and on went the dragon after him. And the tide was low, and sleepy little waves lapped the sand's edge. Now at the lip of the water, Nigel paused and looked back, and the dragon made a bound, beginning a scream of rage that was like all the engines of all the railways in England. But it never uttered the second half of that scream, for now it knew suddenly that it was sleepy. It turned to hurry back to dry land, because sleeping near whirlpools is so unsafe. But before it reached the shore, sleep caught it and turned it to stone. Nigel, seeing this, ran shoreward for his life, and the tide began to flow in, and the time of the whirlpool's sleep was nearly over, and he stumbled and he waded and he swam, and the princess pulled for dear life at the cord in her hand, and pulled him up onto the dry shelf of rock just as the great sea dashed in and made itself once more into the girdle of 9 whirlpools all around the island. But the dragon was asleep under the whirlpools, and when he woke up from being asleep he found he was drowned, so there was an end of him. "Now, there's only the griffin," said Nigel. And the princess said, "Yes, only," and she kissed Nigel and went back to sew the last leaf of the last lily on the bosom of her wedding gown. She thought and thought of what was written on the stone about the griffin being artificial, and next day she said to Nigel, "You know a griffin is half a lion and half an eagle, and the other two halves when they've joined make the Leo Griff. But I've never seen him. Yet I have an idea." So they talked it over and arranged everything. When the griffin fell asleep that afternoon at tea time, Nigel went softly behind him and trod on his tail, and at the same time the princess cried, "Look out! There's a lion behind you." And the griffin, waking suddenly from his dreams, twisted his large neck around to look for the lion, saw a lion's flank, and fastened its eagle beak in it. For the griffin had been artificially made by the king enchanter, and the two halves had never really got used to each other. So now the eagle half of the griffin, who was still rather sleepy, believed that it was fighting a lion, and the lion part, being half asleep, thought it was fighting an eagle, and the whole griffin in its deep drowsiness hadn't the sense to pull itself together and remember what it was made of. So the griffin rolled over and over, one end of it fighting with the other, till the eagle end pecked the lion end to death, and the lion end tore the eagle end with its claws till it died. And so the griffin that was made of a lion and an eagle perished, exactly as if it had been made of Kilkenny cats. "Poor griffin," said the princess, "it was very good at the housework. I always liked it better than the dragon, it wasn't so hot-tempered." At that moment there was a soft, silky rush behind the princess, and there was her mother, the queen, who had slipped out of the stone statue at the moment the griffin was dead, and now came hurrying to take her dear daughter in her arms. The witch was clambering slowly off her pedestal. She was a little stiff from standing still so long. When they had all explained everything over and over to each other as many times as was good for them, the witch said, "Well, but what about the whirlpools?" And Nigel said he didn't know. Then the witch said, "I'm not a witch anymore. I'm only a happy old woman, but I know some things still. Those whirlpools were made by the enchanter king's dropping 9 drops of his blood into the sea. And his blood was so wicked that the sea has been trying ever since to get rid of it, and that made the whirlpools. Now you've only got to go out at low tide." So Nigel understood and went out at low tide, and found in the sandy hollow left by the first whirlpool a great red ruby. That was the first drop of the wicked king's blood. The next day Nigel found another, and next day another, and so on till the 9th day, and then the sea was as smooth as glass. The 9 rubies were used afterwards in agriculture. You had only to throw them out into a field if you wanted it ploughed. Then the whole surface of the land turned itself over in its anxiety to get rid of something so wicked, and in the morning the field was found to be ploughed as thoroughly as any young man at Oxford. So the wicked king did some good after all. When the sea was smooth, ships came from far and wide, bringing people to hear the wonderful story. And a beautiful palace was built, and the princess was married to Nigel in her gold dress, and they all lived happily as long as was good for them. The dragon still lies, a stone dragon on the sand, and at low tide the little children play around him and over him. But the pieces that were left of the griffin were buried under the herb bed in the palace garden, because it had been so good at housework, and it wasn't its fault that it had been made so badly and put to such poor work as guarding a lady from her lover. I have no doubt that you will wish to know what the princess lived on during the long years when the dragon did the cooking. My dear, she lived on her income, and that is a thing that a great many people would like to be able to do. If you like this story, please subscribe. Story 6. The Dragon Tamers. There was once an old castle. It was so old that its walls and towers and turrets and gateways and arches had crumbled to ruins, and of all its old splendor there were only 2 little rooms left, and it was here that John the blacksmith had set up his forge. He was too poor to live in a proper house, and no one asked any rent for the rooms in the ruin, because all the lords of the castle were dead and gone this many a year. So there John blew his bellows and hammered his iron, and did all the work which came his way. This was not much, because most of the trade went to the mayor of the town, who was also a blacksmith in quite a large way of business, and had his huge forge facing the square of the town, and had 12 apprentices, all hammering like a nest of woodpeckers, and 12 journeymen to order the apprentices about, and a patent forge and a self-acting hammer and electric bellows, and all things handsome about him. So of course the townspeople, whenever they wanted a horse shod or a shaft mended, went to the mayor. John the blacksmith struggled on as best he could, with a few odd jobs from travelers and strangers who did not know what a superior forge the mayor's was. The 2 rooms were warm and weather-tight, but not very large, so the blacksmith got into the way of keeping his old iron, his odds and ends, his faggots, and his 2pence worth of coal in the great dungeon down under the castle. It was a very fine dungeon indeed, with a handsome vaulted roof and big iron rings whose staples were built into the wall, very strong and convenient for tying captives to, and at one end was a broken flight of wide steps leading down no one knew where. Even the lords of the castle in the good old times had never known where those steps led to, but every now and then they would kick a prisoner down the steps in their light-hearted, hopeful way, and sure enough, the prisoners never came back. The blacksmith had never dared to go beyond the 7th step, and no more have I. So I know no more than he did what was at the bottom of those stairs. John the blacksmith had a wife and a little baby. When his wife was not doing the housework she used to nurse the baby and cry, remembering the happy days when she lived with her father, who kept 17 cows and lived quite in the country, and when John used to come courting her in the summer evenings, as smart, with a posy in his buttonhole. And now John's hair was getting grey, and there was hardly ever enough to eat. As for the baby, it cried a good deal at odd times, but at night, when its mother had settled down to sleep, it would always begin to cry, quite as a matter of course, so that she hardly got any rest at all. This made her very tired. The baby could make up for its bad nights during the day if it liked, but the poor mother couldn't. So whenever she had nothing to do she used to sit and cry, because she was tired out with work and worry. One evening the blacksmith was busy with his forge. He was making a goat shoe for the goat of a very rich lady, who wished to see how the goat liked being shod, and also whether the shoe would come to 5pence or 7pence before she ordered the whole set. This was the only order John had had that week. And as he worked his wife sat and nursed the baby, who, for a wonder, was not crying. Presently, over the noise of the bellows and over the clank of the iron, there came another sound. The blacksmith and his wife looked at each other. "I heard nothing," said he. "Neither did I," said she. But the noise grew louder, and the 2 were so anxious not to hear it that he hammered away at the goat shoe harder than he had ever hammered in his life, and she began to sing to the baby, a thing she had not had the heart to do for weeks. But through the blowing and hammering and singing the noise came louder and louder, and the more they tried not to hear it, the more they had to. It was like the noise of some great creature purring, 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 and the reason they did not want to believe they really heard it was that it came from the great dungeon down below, where the old iron was, and the firewood and the tuppence worth of coal, and the broken steps that went down into the dark and ended no one knew where. "It can't be anything in the dungeon," said the blacksmith, wiping his face. "Why, I shall have to go down there after more coals in a minute. There isn't anything there, of course." "How could there be?" said his wife. And they tried so hard to believe that there could be nothing there that presently they very nearly did believe it. Then the blacksmith took his shovel in one hand and his riveting hammer in the other, and hung the old stable lantern on his little finger, and went down to get the coals. "I am not taking the hammer because I think there is something there," said he, "but it is handy for breaking the large lumps of coal." "I quite understand," said his wife, who had brought the coal home in her apron that very afternoon, and knew that it was all coal dust. So he went down the winding stairs to the dungeon and stood at the bottom of the steps, holding the lantern above his head just to see that the dungeon really was empty, as usual. Half of it was empty as usual, except for the old iron and odds and ends, and the firewood and the coals. But the other side was not empty. It was quite full, and what it was full of was dragon. "It must have come up those nasty broken steps from goodness knows where," said the blacksmith to himself, trembling all over, as he tried to creep back up the winding stairs. But the dragon was too quick for him. It put out a great claw and caught him by the leg, and as it moved it rattled like a great bunch of keys, or like the sheet iron they make thunder out of in pantomimes. "No you don't," said the dragon in a spluttering voice, like a damp squib. "Dearie, dearie me," said poor John, trembling more than ever in the claw of the dragon. "Here's a nice end for a respectable blacksmith." The dragon seemed very much struck by this remark. "Do you mind saying that again?" said he, quite politely. So John said again, very distinctly, "Here is a nice end for a respectable blacksmith." "I didn't know," said the dragon. "Fancy now. You're the very man I wanted." "So I understood you to say before," said John, his teeth chattering. "Oh, I don't mean what you mean," said the dragon, "but I should like you to do a job for me. One of my wings has got some of the rivets out of it just above the joint. Could you put that to rights?" "I might, sir," said John, politely, for you must always be polite to a possible customer, even if he be a dragon. "A master craftsman, you are a master, of course. Can see in a minute what's wrong," the dragon went on. "Just come around here and feel my plates, will you?" John timidly went around when the dragon took his claw away, and sure enough, the dragon's wing was hanging loose, and several of the plates near the joint certainly wanted riveting. The dragon seemed to be made almost entirely of iron armor, a sort of tawny, red rust color it was, from damp, no doubt, and under it he seemed to be covered with something furry. All the blacksmith welled up in John's heart, and he felt more at ease. "You could certainly do with a rivet or two, sir," said he. "In fact, you want a good many." "Well, get to work, then," said the dragon. "You mend my wing, and then I'll go out and eat up all the town, and if you make a really smart job of it I'll eat you last." "There. I don't want to be eaten last, sir," said John. "Well then," I'll eat you first, said the dragon. I don't want that, sir, either, said John. Go on with you, you silly man, said the dragon, you don't know your own silly mind. Come, set to work. I don't like the job, sir, said John, and that's the truth. I know how easily accidents happen. It's all fair and smooth, and please rivet me, and I'll eat you last, and then you get to work and you give a gentleman a bit of a nip or a dig under his rivets, and then it's fire and smoke, and no apologies will meet the case. Upon my word of honor as a dragon, said the other. I know you wouldn't do it on purpose, sir, said John, but any gentleman will give a jump and a sniff if he's nipped, and one of your sniffs would be enough for me. Now, if you'd just let me fasten you up. It would be so undignified, objected the dragon. We always fasten a horse up, said John, and he's the noble animal. It's all very well, said the dragon, but how do I know you'd untie me again when you'd riveted me? Give me something in pledge. What do you value most? My hammer, said John. A blacksmith is nothing without a hammer. But you want that for riveting me. You must think of something else, and at once, or I'll eat you first. At this moment the baby in the room above began to scream. Its mother had been so quiet that it thought she had settled down for the night, and that it was time to begin. Whatever's that? Said the dragon, starting so that every plate on his body rattled. It's only the baby, said John. What's that? Asked the dragon. Something you value. Well, yes, sir, rather, said the blacksmith. Then bring it here, said the dragon, and I'll take care of it till you've done riveting me, and you shall tie me up. All right, sir, said John, but I ought to warn you. Babies are poison to dragons, so I don't deceive you. It's all right to touch, but don't you go putting it into your mouth. I shouldn't like to see any harm come to a nice-looking gentleman like you. The dragon purred at this compliment and said, All right, I'll be careful. Now go and fetch the thing, whatever it is. So John ran up the steps as quickly as he could, for he knew that if the dragon got impatient before it was fastened, it could heave up the roof of the dungeon with one heave of its back, and kill them all in the ruins. His wife was asleep, in spite of the baby's cries, and John picked up the baby and took it down and put it between the dragon's front paws. You just purr to it, sir, he said, and it'll be as good as gold. So the dragon purred, and his purring pleased the baby so much that it stopped crying. Then John rummaged among the heap of old iron and found there some heavy chains and a great collar that had been made in the days when men sang over their work and put their hearts into it, so that the things they made were strong enough to bear the weight of 1,000 years, let alone a dragon. John fastened the dragon up with the collar and the chains, and when he had padlocked them all on safely he set to work to find out how many rivets would be needed. 6, 8, 10, 20, 40, said he. I haven't half enough rivets in the shop. If you'll excuse me, sir, I'll step around to another forge and get a few dozen. I won't be a minute. And off he went, leaving the baby between the dragon's 4 paws, laughing and crowing with pleasure at the very large purr of it. John ran as hard as he could into the town, and found the mayor and corporation. There's a dragon in my dungeon, he said, I've chained him up. Now come and help to get my baby away. And he told them all about it. But they all happened to have engagements for that evening, so they praised John's cleverness, and said they were quite content to leave the matter in his hands. But what about my baby? said John. "Oh, well," said the mayor, "if anything should happen, you will always be able to remember that your baby perished in a good cause." So John went home again, and told his wife some of the tale. "You've given the baby to the dragon," she cried. "Oh, you unnatural parent." "Hush," said John, and he told her some more. "Now," he said, "I'm going down. After I've been down you can go, and if you keep your head the boy will be all right." So down went the blacksmith, and there was the dragon purring away with all his might to keep the baby quiet. "Hurry up, can't you?" he said. "I can't keep up this noise all night." "I'm very sorry, sir," said the blacksmith, "but all the shops are shut. The job must wait till the morning. And don't forget you've promised to take care of that baby. You'll find it a little wearing, I'm afraid. Good night, sir." The dragon had purred till he was quite out of breath, so now he stopped, and as soon as everything was quiet the baby thought everyone must have settled for the night, and that it was time to begin to scream. So it began. "Oh, dear," said the dragon, "this is awful." He patted the baby with his claw, but it screamed more than ever. "And I am so tired too," said the dragon. "I did so hope I should have a good night." The baby went on screaming. "There'll be no peace for me after this," said the dragon. "It's enough to ruin one's nerves." "Hush, then, didums, then." And he tried to quiet the baby as if it had been a young dragon. But when he began to sing "Hush-a-bye, dragon," the baby screamed more and more and more. "I can't keep it quiet," said the dragon, and then suddenly he saw a woman sitting on the steps. "Here, I say," said he, "do you know anything about babies?" "I do, a little," said the mother. "Then I wish you'd take this one, and let me get some sleep," said the dragon, yawning. "You can bring it back in the morning before the blacksmith comes." So the mother picked up the baby and took it upstairs and told her husband, and they went to bed happy, for they had caught the dragon and saved the baby. And next day John went down and explained carefully to the dragon exactly how matters stood, and he got an iron gate with a grating to it and set it up at the foot of the steps, and the dragon mewed furiously for days and days, but when he found it was no good he was quiet. So now John went to the mayor, and said, "I've got the dragon and I've saved the town." "Noble preserver," cried the mayor, "we will get up a subscription for you, and crown you in public with a laurel wreath." So the mayor put his name down for £5, and the corporation each gave 3, and other people gave their guineas and half crowns, and while the subscription was being made the mayor ordered 3 poems at his own expense from the town poet to celebrate the occasion. The poems were very much more admired, especially by the mayor and corporation. The first poem dealt with the noble conduct of the mayor in arranging to have the dragon tied up. The second described the splendid assistance rendered by the corporation. And the third expressed the pride and joy of the poet in being permitted to sing such deeds, beside which the actions of St. George must appear quite commonplace to all with a feeling heart, or a well-balanced brain. When the subscription was finished there was £1,000, and a committee was formed to settle what should be done with it. A third of it went to pay for a banquet to the mayor and corporation, another third was spent in buying a gold collar with a dragon on it for the mayor and gold medals with dragons on them for the corporation, and what was left went in committee expenses. So there was nothing for the blacksmith except the laurel wreath and the knowledge that it really was he who had saved the town. But after this things went a little better with the blacksmith. To begin with, The baby did not cry so much as it had before. Then the rich lady who owned the goat was so touched by John's noble action that she ordered a complete set of shoes at 2 shillings, 4 pence, and even made it up to 2 shillings, 6 pence, in grateful recognition of his public-spirited conduct. Then tourists used to come in breaks from quite a long way off, and pay 2pence each to go down the steps and peep through the iron grating at the rusty dragon in the dungeon, and it was 3pence extra for each party if the blacksmith let off coloured fire to see it by, which, as the fire was extremely short, was 2pence halfpenny clear profit every time. And the blacksmith's wife used to provide teas at 9pence a head, and altogether things grew brighter week by week. The baby, named John, after his father, and called Johnny for short, began presently to grow up. He was great friends with Tina, the daughter of the whitesmith, who lived nearly opposite. She was a dear little girl with yellow pigtails and blue eyes, and she was tired of hearing the story of how Johnny, when he was a baby, had been minded by a real dragon. The 2 children used to go together to peep through the iron grating at the dragon, and sometimes they would hear him mew piteously. And they would light a halfpenny's worth of coloured fire to look at him by. And they grew older and wiser. At last one day the mayor and corporation, hunting the hare in their gold gowns, came screaming back to the town gates with the news that a lame, humpy giant, as big as a tin church, was coming over the marshes toward the town. "We're lost," said the mayor. "I'd give £1,000 to anyone who could keep that giant out of the town. I know what he eats, by his teeth." No one seemed to know what to do. But Johnny and Tina were listening, and they looked at each other, and ran off as fast as their boots would carry them. They ran through the forge, and down the dungeon steps, and knocked at the iron door. "Who's there?" said the dragon. "It's only us," said the children. And the dragon was so dull from having been alone for 10 years that he said, "Come in, dears. You won't hurt us, or breathe fire at us or anything?" asked Tina. And the dragon said, "Not for worlds." So they went in and talked to him, and told him what the weather was like outside, and what there was in the papers, and at last Johnny said, "There's a lame giant in the town. He wants you?" "Does he?" said the dragon, showing his teeth. "If only I were out of this. If we let you loose you might manage to run away before he could catch you." "Yes, I might," answered the dragon, "but then again I mightn't." "Why, you never fight him," said Tina. "No," said the dragon, "I'm all for peace, I am. You let me out, and you'll see." So the children loosed the dragon from the chains and the collar, and he broke down one end of the dungeon and went out, only pausing at the forge door to get the blacksmith to rivet his wing. He met the lame giant at the gate of the town, and the giant banged on the dragon with his club as if he were banging an iron foundry, and the dragon behaved like a smelting works, all fire and smoke. It was a fearful sight, and people watched it from a distance, falling off their legs with the shock of every bang, but always getting up to look again. At last the dragon won, and the giant sneaked away across the marshes, and the dragon, who was very tired, went home to sleep, announcing his intention of eating the town in the morning. He went back into his old dungeon because he was a stranger in the town, and he did not know of any other respectable lodging. Then Tina and Johnny went to the mayor and corporation and said, "The giant is settled. Please give us the £1,000 reward." But the mayor said, "No, no, my boy. It is not you who have settled the giant, it is the dragon. I suppose you have chained him up again. When he comes to claim the reward he shall have it. He isn't chained up yet, said Johnny. Shall I send him to claim the reward? But the mayor said he need not trouble, and now he offered £1,000 to anyone who would get the dragon chained up again. I don't trust you, said Johnny. Look how you treated my father when he chained up the dragon. But the people who were listening at the door interrupted, and said that if Johnny could fasten up the dragon again they would turn out the mayor and let Johnny be mayor in his place. For they had been dissatisfied with the mayor for some time, and thought they would like a change. So Johnny said, "Done," and off he went, hand in hand with Tina, and they called on all their little friends and said, "Will you help us to save the town?" And all the children said, "Yes, of course we will." What fun! Well, then, said Tina, you must all bring your basins of bread and milk to the forge tomorrow at breakfast time. And if ever I am mayor, said Johnny, I will give a banquet, and you shall be invited. And we'll have nothing but sweet things from beginning to end. All the children promised, and next morning Tina and Johnny rolled their big washing tub down the winding stair. What's that noise? Asked the dragon. It's only a big giant breathing, said Tina, he's gone by now. Then, when all the town children brought their bread and milk, Tina emptied it into the wash tub, and when the tub was full Tina knocked at the iron door with the grating in it and said, "May we come in?" "Oh, yes," said the dragon, "it's very dull here." So they went in, and with the help of 9 other children they lifted the washing tub in and set it down by the dragon. Then all the other children went away, and Tina and Johnny sat down and cried. "What's this?" asked the dragon. "And what's the matter?" "This is bread and milk," said Johnny, "it's our breakfast, all of it." "Well," said the dragon, "I don't see what you want with breakfast. I'm going to eat everyone in the town as soon as I've rested a little." "Dear Mr. Dragon," said Tina, "I wish you wouldn't eat us. How would you like to be eaten yourself?" "Not at all," the dragon confessed, "but nobody will eat me." "I don't know," said Johnny, "there's a giant." "I know. I fought with him, and licked him." "Yes, but there's another come now, the one you fought was only this one's little boy. This one is half as big again." "He's 7 times as big," said Tina. "No, 9 times, said Johnny. "He's bigger than the steeple." "Oh, dear," said the dragon. "I never expected this." "And the mayor has told him where you are," Tina went on, "and he's coming to eat you as soon as he has sharpened his big knife. The mayor told him you were a wild dragon, but he didn't mind. He said he only ate wild dragons, with bread sauce." "That's tiresome," said the dragon. "And I suppose this sloppy stuff in the tub is the bread sauce." The children said it was. "Of course," they added, "bread sauce is only served with wild dragons. Tame ones are served with apple sauce and onion stuffing." "What a pity you're not a tame one, he'd never look at you then," they said. "Goodbye, poor dragon, we shall never see you again, and now you'll know what it's like to be eaten." And they began to cry again. "Well, but look here," said the dragon, "couldn't you pretend I was a tame dragon? Tell the giant that I'm just a poor little timid tame dragon that you kept for a pet." "He'd never believe it," said Johnny. "If you were our tame dragon we should keep you tied up, you know. We shouldn't like to risk losing such a dear, pretty pet." Then the dragon begged them to fasten him up at once, and they did so, with the collar and chains that were made years ago, in the days when men sang over their work and made it strong enough to bear any strain. And then they went away and told the people what they had done, and Johnny was made mayor, and had a glorious feast exactly as he had said he would, with nothing in it but sweet things. It began with Turkish delight and halfpenny buns, and went on with oranges, toffee, coconut ice, peppermints, jam puffs, raspberry noyo, ice creams and meringues, and ended with bullseyes and gingerbread and acid drops. This was all very well for Johnny and Tina, but if you are kind children with feeling hearts, you will perhaps feel sorry for the poor deceived, deluded dragon, chained up in the dull dungeon, with nothing to do but to think over the shocking untruths that Johnny had told him. When he thought how he had been tricked, the poor captive dragon began to weep, and the large tears fell down over his rusty plates. And presently he began to feel faint, as people sometimes do when they have been crying, especially if they have not had anything to eat for 10 years or so. And then the poor creature dried his eyes and looked about him, and there he saw the tub of bread and milk. So he thought, if giants like this damp, white stuff, perhaps I should like it too, and he tasted a little, and liked it so much that he ate it all up. And the next time the tourists came, and Johnny let off the colored fire, the dragon said shyly, "Excuse my troubling you, but could you bring me a little more bread and milk?" So Johnny arranged that people should go around with carts every day to collect the children's bread and milk for the dragon. The children were fed at the town's expense, on whatever they liked, and they ate nothing but cake and buns and sweet things, and they said the poor dragon was very welcome to their bread and milk. Now, when Johnny had been mayor 10 years or so, he married Tina, and on their wedding morning they went to see the dragon. He had grown quite tame, and his rusty plates had fallen off in places, and underneath he was soft and furry to stroke. So now they stroked him. And he said, "I don't know how I could ever have liked eating anything but bread and milk. I am a tame dragon now, aren't I?" And when they said that yes, he was, the dragon said, "I am so tame, won't you undo me?" And some people would have been afraid to trust him, but Johnny and Tina were so happy on their wedding day that they could not believe any harm of anyone in the world. So they loosened the chains, and the dragon said, "Excuse me a moment, there are 1 or 2 little things I should like to fetch," and he moved off to those mysterious steps and went down them, out of sight into the darkness. And as he moved, more and more of his rusty plates fell off. In a few minutes they heard him clanking up the steps. He brought something in his mouth. It was a bag of gold. "It's no good to me," he said. "Perhaps you might find it useful." So they thanked him very kindly. "More where that came from," said he, and fetched more and more and more, till they told him to stop. So now they were rich, and so were their fathers and mothers. Indeed, everyone was rich, and there were no more poor people in the town. And they all got rich without working, which is very wrong, but the dragon had never been to school, as you have, so he knew no better. And as the dragon came out of the dungeon, following Johnny and Tina into the bright gold and blue of their wedding day, he blinked his eyes as a cat does in the sunshine, and he shook himself, and the last of his plates dropped off, and his wings with them, and he was just like a very, very extra-sized cat. And from that day he grew furrier and furrier, and he was the beginning of all cats. Nothing of the dragon remained except the claws, which all cats have still, as you can easily ascertain. And I hope you see now how important it is to feed your cat with bread and milk. If you were to let it have nothing to eat but mice and birds, it might grow larger and fiercer, and scalier and tailier, and get wings and turn into the beginning of dragons. And then there would be all the bother over again. If you like this story, please subscribe. Story 7. The Fiery Dragon. The little white princess always woke in her little white bed when the starlings began to chatter in the pearl-grey morning. As soon as the woods were awake, she used to run up the twisting turret stairs with her little bare feet, and stand on the top of the tower in her white bedgown, and kiss her hands to the sun and to the woods and to the sleeping town, and say, "Good morning, pretty world." Then she would run down the cold stone steps and dress herself in her short skirt and her cap and apron, and begin the day's work. She swept the rooms and made the breakfast, she washed the dishes and she scoured the pans, and all this she did because she was a real princess. For of all who should have served her, only one remained faithful, her old nurse, who had lived with her in the tower all the princess's life. And now the nurse was old and feeble, the princess would not let her work any more, but did all the housework herself, while nurse sat still and did the sewing, because this was a real princess with skin like milk and hair like flax and a heart like gold. Her name was Sabrinetta, and her grandmother was Sabra, who married St. George after he had killed the dragon, and by real rights all the country belonged to her. The woods that stretched away to the mountains, the downs that sloped down to the sea, the pretty fields of corn and maize and rye, the olive orchards and the vineyards, and the little town itself, with its towers and its turrets, its steep roofs and strange windows, that nestled in the hollow between the sea, where the whirlpool was, and the mountains, white with snow and rosy with sunrise. But when her father and mother had died, leaving her cousin to take care of the kingdom till she grew up, he, being a very evil prince, took everything away from her, and all the people followed him, and now nothing was left her of all her possessions except the great dragon-proof tower that her grandfather, St. George, had built, and of all who should have been her servants only the good nurse. This was why Sabrinetta was the first person in all the land to get a glimpse of the wonder. Early, while all the townspeople were fast asleep, she ran up the turret steps and looked out over the field, and at the other side of the field there was a green, ferny ditch and a rose-thorny hedge, and then came the wood. And as Sabrinetta stood on her tower she saw a shaking and a twisting of the rose-thorny hedge, and then something very bright and shining wriggled out through it into the ferny ditch and back again. It only came out for a minute, but she saw it quite plainly, and she said to herself, "Dear me, what a curious, shiny, bright-looking creature. If it were bigger, and if I didn't know that there have been no fabulous monsters for quite a long time now, I should almost think it was a dragon." The thing, whatever it was, did look rather like a dragon, but then it was too small, and it looked rather like a lizard, only then it was too big. It was about as long as a hearthrug. "I wish it had not been in such a hurry to get back into the wood," said Sabrinetta. "Of course, it's quite safe for me, in my dragon-proof tower, but if it is a dragon, it's quite big enough to eat people, and today's the 1st of May, and the children go out to get flowers in the wood." When Sabrinetta had done the housework, she did not leave so much as a speck of dust anywhere, even in the corneriest corner of the winding stair. She put on her milk-white, silky gown with the moon daisies worked on it, and went up to the top of her tower again. Across the fields troops of children were going out to gather the May, and the sound of their laughter and singing came up to the top of the tower. "I do hope it wasn't a dragon," said Sabrinetta. The children went by 2s and by 3s and by 10s and by 20s, and the red and blue and yellow and white of their frocks were scattered on the green of the field. "It's like a green silk mantle worked with flowers," said the princess, smiling. Then by 2s and by 3s, By tens and by twenties, the children vanished into the wood, till the mantle of the field was left plain green once more. All the embroideries unpicked, said the princess, sighing. The sun shone, and the sky was blue, and the fields were quite green, and all the flowers were very bright indeed, because it was May Day. Then quite suddenly a cloud passed over the sun, and the silence was broken by shrieks from far off. Unlike a many-colored torrent, all the children burst from the wood and rushed, a red and blue and yellow and white wave, across the field, screaming as they ran. Their voices came up to the princess on her tower, and she heard the words threaded on their screams like beads on sharp needles, "The dragon, the dragon, the dragon. Open the gates. The dragon is coming. The fiery dragon." And they swept across the field and into the gate of the town, and the princess heard the gate bang, and the children were out of sight, but on the other side of the field the rose thorns crackled and smashed in the hedge, and something very large and glaring and horrible trampled the ferns in the ditch for one moment before it hid itself again in the cover of the wood. The princess went down and told her nurse, and the nurse at once locked the great door of the tower and put the key in her pocket. "Let them take care of themselves," she said, when the princess begged to be allowed to go out and help to take care of the children. "My business is to take care of you, my precious, and I'm going to do it. Old as I am, I can turn a key still." So Sabrinetta went up again to the top of her tower, and cried whenever she thought of the children and the fiery dragon. For she knew, of course, that the gates of the town were not dragon-proof, and that the dragon could just walk in whenever he liked. The children ran straight to the palace, where the prince was cracking his hunting whip down at the kennels, and told him what had happened. "Good sport," said the prince, and he ordered out his pack of hippopotamuses at once. It was his custom to hunt big game with hippopotamuses, and people would not have minded that so much, but he would swagger about in the streets of the town with his pack yelping and gambling at his heels, and when he did that, the greengrocer, who had his stall in the marketplace, always regretted it, and the crockery merchant, who spread his wares on the pavement, was ruined for life every time the prince chose to show off his pack. The prince rode out of the town with his hippopotamuses trotting and frisking behind him, and people got inside their houses as quickly as they could when they heard the voices of his pack, and the blowing of his horn. The pack squeezed through the town gates and off across country to hunt the dragon. Few of you who had not seen a pack of hippopotamuses in full cry will be able to imagine at all what the hunt was like. To begin with, hippopotamuses do not bay like hounds, they grunt like pigs, and their grunt is very big and fierce. Then, of course, no one expects hippopotamuses to jump. They just crash through the hedges and lumber through the standing corn, doing serious injury to the crops, and annoying the farmers very much. All the hippopotamuses had collars with their name and address on, but when the farmers called at the palace to complain of the injury to their standing crops, the prince always said it served them right for leaving their crops standing about in people's way, and he never paid anything at all. So now, when he and his pack went out, several people in the town whispered, "I wish the dragon would eat him," which was very wrong of them, no doubt, but then he was such a very nasty prince. They hunted by field, and they hunted by wold, they drew the woods blank, and the scent didn't lie on the downs at all. The dragon was shy, and would not show himself. But just as the prince was beginning to think there was no dragon at all, but only a cock and bull, his favorite old hippopotamus gave tongue. The prince blew his horn and shouted, "Tally-ho! Hark forward! Tantivy!" And the whole pack charged downhill toward the hollow by the wood. For there, plain to be seen, was the dragon, as big as a barge, glowing like a furnace, and spitting fire and showing his shining teeth. "The hunt is up," cried the prince. And indeed it was. For the dragon, instead of behaving as a quarry should, and running away, ran straight at the pack, and the prince on his elephant, had the mortification of seeing his prize pack swallowed up one by one in the twinkling of an eye, by the dragon they had come out to hunt. The dragon swallowed all the hippopotamuses just as a dog swallows bits of meat. It was a shocking sight. Of the whole of the pack that had come out sporting so merrily to the music of the horn, now not even a puppy hippopotamus was left, and the dragon was looking anxiously around to see if he had forgotten anything. The prince slipped off his elephant on the other side and ran into the thickest part of the wood. He hoped the dragon could not break through the bushes there, since they were very strong and close. He went crawling on hands and knees in a most unprince-like way, and at last, finding a hollow tree, he crept into it. The wood was very still, no crashing of branches and no smell of burning came to alarm the prince. He drained the silver hunting bottle slung from his shoulder, and stretched his legs in the hollow tree. He never shed a single tear for his poor tame hippopotamuses who had eaten from his hand and followed him faithfully in all the pleasures of the chase for so many years. For he was a false prince, with a skin like leather and hair like hearth brushes and a heart like a stone. He never shed a tear, but he just went to sleep. When he awoke it was dark. He crept out of the tree, and rubbed his eyes. The wood was black about him, but there was a red glow in a dell close by. It was a fire of sticks, and beside it sat a ragged youth with long, yellow hair. All around lay sleeping forms which breathed heavily. "Who are you?" said the prince. "I'm Elfin, the pig keeper," said the ragged youth. "And who are you?" "I'm Tiresome, the prince," said the other. "And what are you doing out of your palace at this time of night?" asked the pig keeper, severely. "I've been hunting," said the prince. The pig keeper laughed. "Oh, it was you I saw, then. A good hunt, wasn't it? My pigs and I were looking on." All the sleeping forms grunted and snored, and the prince saw that they were pigs. He knew it by their manners. "If you had known as much as I do," Elfin went on, "you might have saved your pack." "What do you mean?" said Tiresome. "Why, the dragon," said Elfin. "You went out at the wrong time of day. The dragon should be hunted at night." "No, thank you," said the prince, with a shudder. "A daylight hunt is quite good enough for me, you silly pig keeper." "Oh, well," said Elfin, "do as you like about it, the dragon will come and hunt you tomorrow, as likely as not." "I don't care if he does, you silly prince." "You're very rude," said Tiresome. "Oh, no, only truthful," said Elfin. "Well, tell me the truth, then. What is it that, if I had known as much as you do about, I shouldn't have lost my hippopotamuses?" "You don't speak very good English," said Elfin. "But come, what will you give me if I tell you?" "If you tell me what?" said the tiresome prince. "What you want to know?" "I don't want to know anything," said Prince Tiresome. "Then you're more of a silly even than I thought," said Elfin. "Don't you want to know how to settle the dragon before he settles you?" "It might be as well," the prince admitted. "Well, I haven't much patience at any time," said Elfin, "and now I can assure you that there's very little left." "What will you give me if I tell you?" "Half my kingdom," said the prince, "and my cousin's hand in marriage." "Done," said the pig keeper. Here goes. The dragon grows small at night. He sleeps under the root of this tree. I use him to light my fire with. And sure enough, there under the tree was the dragon on a nest of scorched moss, and he was about as long as your finger. How can I kill him? Asked the prince. I don't know that you can kill him, said Elfin, but you can take him away if you've brought anything to put him in. That bottle of yours would do. So between them they managed, with bits of stick and by singeing their fingers a little, to poke and shove the dragon till they made it creep into the silver hunting bottle, and then the prince screwed on the top tight. Now we've got him, said Elfin. Let's take him home and put Solomon's seal on the mouth of the bottle, and then he'll be safe enough. Come along, we'll divide up the kingdom tomorrow, and then I shall have some money to buy fine clothes to go courting in. But when the wicked prince made promises he did not make them to keep. Go on with you. What do you mean? He said. I found the dragon and I've imprisoned him. I never said a word about courtings or kingdoms. If you say I did, I shall cut your head off at once. And he drew his sword. All right, said Elfin, shrugging his shoulders. I'm better off than you are, anyhow. What do you mean? Spluttered the prince. Why, you've only got a kingdom, and a dragon, but I've got clean hands, and 75 fine black pigs. So Elfin sat down again by his fire, and the prince went home and told his parliament how clever and brave he had been. And though he woke them up on purpose to tell them, they were not angry, but said, You are indeed brave and clever. For they knew what happened to people with whom the prince was not pleased. Then the Prime Minister solemnly put Solomon's seal on the mouth of the bottle, and the bottle was put in the treasury, which was the strongest building in the town, and was made of solid copper, with walls as thick as Waterloo Bridge. The bottle was set down among the sacks of gold, and the junior secretary to the junior clerk of the last Lord of the Treasury was appointed to sit up all night with it and see if anything happened. The junior secretary had never seen a dragon, and what was more, he did not believe the prince had ever seen a dragon either. The prince had never been a really truthful boy. And it would have been just like him to bring home a bottle with nothing in it and then to pretend that there was a dragon inside. So the junior secretary did not at all mind being left. They gave him the key, and when everyone in the town had gone back to bed he let in some of the junior secretaries from other government departments, and they had a jolly game of hide and seek among the sacks of gold, and played marbles with the diamonds and rubies and pearls in the big ivory chests. They enjoyed themselves very much, but by and by the copper treasury began to get warmer and warmer, and suddenly the junior secretary cried out, Look at the bottle. The bottle sealed with Solomon's seal had swollen to 3 times its proper size and seemed to be nearly red hot. And the air got warmer and warmer and the bottle bigger and bigger, till all the junior secretaries agreed that the place was too hot to hold them, and out they went, tumbling over each other in their haste, and just as the last got out and locked the door the bottle burst, and out came the dragon, very fiery, and swelling more and more every minute. And he began to eat the sacks of gold and crunch up the pearls and diamonds and rubies as if they were sugar. By breakfast time he had devoured the whole of the prince's treasures, and when the prince came along the street at about 11, he met the dragon coming out of the broken door of the treasury, with molten gold still dripping from his jaws. Then the prince turned and ran for his life. And as he ran toward the dragon-proof tower the little white princess saw him coming, and she ran down and unlocked the door and let him in, and slammed the dragon-proof door in the fiery face of the dragon, who sat down and whined outside, because he wanted the prince very much indeed. The princess took Prince Tiresome into the best room, and laid the cloth, and gave him cream and eggs and white grapes and honey and bread, with many other things, yellow and white and good to eat, and she served him just as kindly as she would have done if he had been anyone else instead of the bad prince who had taken away her kingdom and kept it for himself, because she was a true princess and had a heart of gold. When he had eaten and drunk, he begged the princess to show him how to lock and unlock the door. The nurse was asleep, so there was no one to tell the princess not to, and she did. "You turn the key like this," she said, "and the door keeps shut. But turn it 9 times around the wrong way, and the door flies open." And so it did. And the moment it opened, the prince pushed the white princess out of her tower, just as he had pushed her out of her kingdom, and shut the door. For he wanted to have the tower all for himself. And there she was, in the street, and on the other side of the way the dragon was sitting whining, but he did not try to eat her, because, though the old nurse did not know it, dragons cannot eat white princesses with hearts of gold. The princess could not walk through the streets of the town in her milky silky gown with the daisies on it, and with no hat and no gloves, so she turned the other way, and ran out across the meadows, toward the wood. She had never been out of her tower before, and the soft grass under her feet felt like grass of paradise. She ran right into the thickest part of the wood, because she did not know what her heart was made of, and she was afraid of the dragon, and there in a dell she came on Elfin and his 75 fine pigs. He was playing his flute, and around him the pigs were dancing cheerfully on their hind legs. "Oh, dear," said the princess, "do take care of me. I am so frightened." "I will," said Elfin, putting his arms around her. "Now you are quite safe." "What were you frightened of?" "The dragon," she said. "So it's gotten out of the silver bottle," said Elfin. "I hope it's eaten the prince." "No," said Sabrinetta. "But why?" "He told her of the mean trick that the prince had played on him. And he promised me half his kingdom and the hand of his cousin the princess," said Elfin. "Oh, dear, what a shame," said Sabrinetta, trying to get out of his arms. "How dare he? What's the matter?" he asked, holding her tighter. "It was a shame, or at least I thought so. But now he may keep his kingdom, half and whole, if I may keep what I have." "What's that?" asked the princess. "Why, you, my pretty, my dear," said Elfin, "and as for the princess, his cousin, forgive me, dearest heart, but when I asked for her I hadn't seen the real princess, the only princess, my princess." "Do you mean me?" said Sabrinetta. "Who else?" he asked. "Yes, but 5 minutes ago you hadn't seen me. 5 minutes ago I was a pig keeper, now I've held you in my arms I'm a prince, though I should have to keep pigs to the end of my days." "But you haven't asked me," said the princess. "You asked me to take care of you," said Elfin, "and I will, all my life long." So that was settled, and they began to talk of really important things, such as the dragon and the prince, and all the time Elfin did not know that this was the princess, but he knew that she had a heart of gold, and he told her so many times. "The mistake," said Elfin, "was in not having a dragon-proof bottle. I see that now." "Oh, is that all?" said the princess. "I can easily get you one of those, because everything in my tower is dragon-proof. We ought to do something to settle the dragon and save the little children." So she started off to get the bottle, but she would not let Elfin come with her. "If what you say is true," she said, "if you are sure that I have a heart of gold, the dragon won't hurt me, and somebody must stay with the pigs. Elfin was quite sure, so he let her go. She found the door of her tower open. The dragon had waited patiently for the prince, and the moment he opened the door and came out, though he was only out for an instant to post a letter to his prime minister saying where he was and asking them to send the fire brigade to deal with the fiery dragon, the dragon ate him. Then the dragon went back to the wood, because it was getting near his time to grow small for the night. So Sabrinetta went in and kissed her nurse and made her a cup of tea and explained what was going to happen, and that she had a heart of gold, so the dragon couldn't eat her, and the nurse saw that of course the princess was quite safe, and kissed her and let her go. She took the dragon-proof bottle, made of burnished brass, and ran back to the wood, and to the dell, where Elfin was sitting among his sleek black pigs, waiting for her. "I thought you were never coming back," he said. "You have been away a year, at least." The princess sat down beside him among the pigs, and they held each other's hands till it was dark, and then the dragon came crawling over the moss, scorching it as he came, and getting smaller as he crawled, and curled up under the root of the tree. "Now then," said Elfin, "you hold the bottle." Then he poked and prodded the dragon with bits of stick till it crawled into the dragon-proof bottle. But there was no stopper. "Never mind," said Elfin. "I'll put my finger in for a stopper." "No, let me," said the princess. But of course Elfin would not let her. He stuffed his finger into the top of the bottle, and the princess cried out, the sea, run for the cliffs." And off they went, with the 75 pigs trotting steadily after them in a long black procession. The bottle got hotter and hotter in Elfin's hands, because the dragon inside was puffing fire and smoke with all his might, hotter and hotter and hotter, but Elfin held on till they came to the cliff edge, and there was the dark blue sea, and the whirlpool going around and around. Elfin lifted the bottle high above his head and hurled it out between the stars and the sea, and it fell in the middle of the whirlpool. "We've saved the country," said the princess. "You've saved the little children. Give me your hands." "I can't," said Elfin. "I shall never be able to take your dear hands again. My hands are burnt off." And so they were. There were only black cinders where his hands ought to have been. The princess kissed them, and cried over them, and tore pieces of her silky milky gown to tie them up with, and the two went back to the tower and told the nurse all about everything. And the pigs sat outside and waited. "He is the bravest man in the world," said Sabrinetta. "He has saved the country and the little children, but, oh, his hands, his poor, dear, darling hands." Here the door of the room opened, and the oldest of the 75 pigs came in. It went up to Elfin and rubbed itself against him with little loving grunts. "See the dear creature," said the nurse, wiping away a tear. "It knows, it knows?" Sabrinetta stroked the pig, because Elfin had no hands for stroking or for anything else. "The only cure for a dragon burn," said the old nurse, "is pig's fat, and well that faithful creature knows it." "I wouldn't for a kingdom," cried Elfin, stroking the pig as best he could with his elbow. "Is there no other cure?" asked the princess. Here another pig put its black nose in at the door, and then another and another, till the room was full of pigs, a surging mass of rounded blackness, pushing and struggling to get at Elfin, and grunting softly in the language of true affection. "There is one other," said the nurse. "The dear, affectionate beasts, they all want to die for you." "What is the other cure?" said Sabrinetta anxiously. "If a man is burnt by a dragon," said the nurse, and a certain number of people are willing to die for him, it is enough if each should kiss the burn and wish it well in the depths of his loving heart. The number. The number, cried Sabrinetta. 77, said the nurse. We have only 75 pigs, said the princess, and with me that's 76. It must be 77, and I really can't die for him, so nothing can be done, said the nurse, sadly. He must have cork hands. I knew about the 77 loving people, said Elfin. But I never thought my dear pigs loved me so much as all this, and my dear too, and of course, that only makes it more impossible. There's one other charm that cures dragon burns, though, but I'd rather be burnt black all over than marry anyone but you, my dear, my pretty. Why, who must you marry to cure your dragon burns? Asked Sabrinetta. A princess. That's how St. George cured his burns. There now? Think of that, said the nurse. And I never heard tell of that cure, old as I am. But Sabrinetta threw her arms round Elfin's neck, and held him as though she would never let him go. Then it's all right, my dear, brave, precious Elfin, she cried, for I am a princess, and you shall be my prince. Come along, nurse, don't wait to put on your bonnet. We'll go and be married this very moment. So they went, and the pigs came after, moving in stately blackness, 2 by 2. And the minute he was married to the princess, Elfin's hands got quite well. And the people, who were weary of Prince Tiresome and his hippopotamuses, hailed Sabrinetta, and her husband as rightful sovereigns of the land. Next morning the prince and princess went out to see if the dragon had been washed ashore. They could see nothing of him, but when they looked out toward the whirlpool they saw a cloud of steam, and the fisherman reported that the water for miles around was hot enough to shave with. And as the water is hot there to this day, we may feel pretty sure that the fierceness of that dragon was such that all the waters of all the sea were not enough to cool him. The whirlpool is too strong for him to be able to get out of it, so there he spins around and around forever and ever, doing some useful work at last, and warming the water for poor fisher folk to shave with. The prince and princess rule the land well and wisely. The nurse lives with them, and does nothing but fine sewing, and only that when she wants to very much. The prince keeps no hippopotamuses, and is consequently very popular. The 75 devoted pigs live in white marble sties with brass knockers and pig on the doorplate, and are washed, twice a day with Turkish sponges and soap scented with violets, and no one objects to their following the prince when he walks abroad, for they behave beautifully, and always keep to the footpath, and obey the notices about not walking on the grass. The princess feeds them every day with her own hands, and her first edict on coming to the throne was that the word pork should never be uttered on pain of death, and should, besides, be scratched out of all the dictionaries. If you like this story, please subscribe. Story 8. The Caves and the Cockatrice. Edmund was a boy. The people who did not like him said that he was the most tiresome boy that ever lived, but his grandmother and his other friends said that he had an inquiring mind. And his granny often added that he was the best of boys. But she was very kind and very old. Edmund loved to find out about things. Perhaps you will think that in that case he was constant in his attendance at school, since there, if anywhere, we may learn whatever there is to be learned. But Edmund did not want to learn things, he wanted to find things out, which is quite different. His inquiring mind led him to take clocks to pieces to see what made them go, to take locks off doors to see what made them stick. It was Edmund who cut open the India rubber ball to see what made it bounce, and he never did see, any more than you did when you tried the same experiment. Edmund lived with his grandmother. She loved him very much, in spite of his inquiring mind, and hardly scolded him at all when he frizzled up her tortoiseshell comb in his anxiety to find out whether it was made of real tortoiseshell or of something that would burn. Edmund went to school, of course, now and then, and sometimes he could not prevent himself from learning something, but he never did it on purpose. "It is such waste of time," said he. "They only know what everybody knows. I want to find out new things that nobody has thought of but me." "I don't think you're likely to find out anything that none of the wise men in the whole world have thought of all these thousands of years," said Granny. But Edmund did not agree with her. He played truant whenever he could, for he was a kind-hearted boy, and could not bear to think of a master's time and labor being thrown away on a boy like himself, who did not wish to learn, only to find out, when there were so many worthy lads thirsting for instruction in geography and history and reading and ciphering, and Mr. Smiles's self-help. Other boys played truant too, of course, and these went nutting or blackberrying or wild plum gathering, but Edmund never went on the side of the town where the green woods and hedges grew. He always went up the mountain where the great rocks were, and the tall, dark pine trees, and where other people were afraid to go because of the strange noises that came out of the caves. Edmund was not afraid of these noises, though they were very strange and terrible. He wanted to find out what made them. One day he did. He had invented, all by himself, a very ingenious and new kind of lantern, made with a turnip and a tumbler, and when he took the candle out of Granny's bedroom candlestick to put in it, it gave quite a splendid light. He had to go to school next day, and he was caned for being absent without leave, although he very straightforwardly explained that he had been too busy making the lantern to have time to come to school. But the day after he got up very early and took the lunch Granny had ready for him to take to school, 2 boiled eggs and an apple turnover, and he took his lantern and went off as straight as a dart to the mountains to explore the caves. The caves were very dark, but his lantern lighted them up beautifully, and they were most interesting caves, with stalactites and stalagmites and fossils, and all the things you read about in the instructive books for the young. But Edmund did not care for any of these things just then. He wanted to find out what made the noises that people were afraid of, and there was nothing in the caves to tell him. Presently he sat down in the biggest cave and listened very carefully, and it seemed to him that he could distinguish 3 different sorts of noises. There was a heavy rumbling sound, like a very large old gentleman asleep after dinner, and there was a smaller sort of rumble going on at the same time, and there was a sort of crowing, clucking sound, such as a chicken might make if it happened to be as big as a haystack. "It seems to me," said Edmund to himself, "that the clucking is nearer than the others." So he started up again and explored the caves once more. He found out nothing, but about halfway up the wall of the cave, he saw a hole. And being a boy, he climbed up to it and crept in, and it was the entrance to a rocky passage. And now the clucking sounded more plainly than before, and he could hardly hear the rumbling at all. "I am going to find out something at last," said Edmund, and on he went. The passage wound and twisted and turned and wound, but Edmund kept on. "My lantern's burning better and better," said he presently, but the next minute he saw that all the light did not come from his lantern. It was a pale yellow light, and it shone down the passage far ahead of him through what looked like the chink of a door. "I expect it's the fire in the middle of the earth," said Edmund, who had not been able to help learning about that at school. But quite suddenly the fire ahead gave a pale flicker and went down, and the clucking ceased. The next moment Edmund turned a corner and found himself in front of a rocky door. The door was ajar. He went in, and there was a round cave, like the dome of St. Paul's. In the middle of the cave was a hole like a very big hand-washing basin, and in the middle of the basin Edmund saw a large pale person sitting. This person had a man's face and a griffin's body, and big feathery wings, and a snake's tail, and a cock's comb and neck feathers. "Whatever are you?" said Edmund. "I'm a poor starving cockatrice," answered the pale person in a very faint voice, "and I shall die, oh, I know I shall. My fire's gone out. I can't think how it happened, I must have been asleep. I have to stir it 7 times round with my tail once in 100 years to keep it alight, and my watch must have been wrong. And now I shall die. I think I have said before what a kind-hearted boy Edmund was." "Cheer up," said he. "I'll light your fire for you." And off he went, and in a few minutes he came back with a great armful of sticks from the pine trees outside, and with these and a lesson book or 2 that he had forgotten to lose before, and which, quite by an oversight, were safe in his pocket, he lit a fire all around the cockatrice. The wood blazed up, and presently something in the basin caught fire, and Edmund saw that it was a sort of liquid that burned like the brandy in a snapdragon. And now the cockatrice stirred it with his tail and flapped his wings in it so that some of it splashed out on Edmund's hand and burnt it rather badly. But the cockatrice grew red and strong and happy, and its comb grew scarlet, and its feathers glossy, and it lifted itself up and crowed cock-a-trice-a-doodle-doo, very loudly and clearly. Edmund's kindly nature was charmed to see the cockatrice so much improved in health, and he said, "Don't mention it," delighted, I'm sure, when the cockatrice began to thank him. "But what can I do for you?" said the creature. "Tell me stories," said Edmund. "What about?" said the cockatrice. "About true things that they don't know at school," said Edmund. So the cockatrice began, and he told him about mines and treasures and geological formations, and about gnomes and fairies and dragons, and about glaciers and the Stone Age and the beginning of the world, and about the unicorn, and the phoenix, and about magic, black and white. And Edmund ate his eggs and his turnover, and listened. And when he got hungry again he said goodbye and went home. But he came again the next day for more stories, and the next day, and the next, for a long time. He told the boys at school about the cockatrice and his wonderful true tales, and the boys liked the stories, but when he told the master he was caned for untruthfulness. "But it's true," said Edmund. "Just you look where the fire burnt my hand. I see you've been playing with fire, into mischief as usual," said the master, and he caned Edmund harder than ever. The master was ignorant and unbelieving, but I am told that some schoolmasters are not like that. Now, one day Edmund made a new lantern out of something chemical that he sneaked from the school laboratory. And with it he went exploring again to see if he could find the things that made the other sorts of noises. And in quite another part of the mountain he found a dark passage, all lined with brass, so that it was like the inside of a huge telescope, and at the very end of it he found a bright green door. There was a brass plate on the door that said Mrs. D. Knock and ring, and a white label that said Call me at 3. Edmund had a watch. It had been given to him on his birthday 2 days before, and he had not yet had time to take it to pieces and see what made it go, so it was still going. He looked at it now. It said 2:45. Did I tell you before what a kind-hearted boy Edmund was? He sat down on the brass doorstep and waited till 3 o'clock. Then he knocked and rang, and there was a rattling and puffing inside. The great door flew open, and Edmund had only just time to hide behind it when out came an immense yellow dragon, who wriggled off down the brass cave like a long, rattling worm, or perhaps more like a monstrous centipede. Edmund crept slowly out and saw the dragon stretching herself on the rocks in the sun, and he crept past the great creature and tore down the hill into the town and burst into school, crying out, "There's a great dragon coming. Somebody ought to do something, or we shall all be destroyed." He was caned for untruthfulness without any delay. His master was never one for postponing a duty. "But it's true," said Edmund. "You just see if it isn't." He pointed out of the window, and everyone could see a vast yellow cloud rising up into the air above the mountain. "It's only a thunder shower," said the master, and caned Edmund more than ever. This master was not like some masters I know. He was very obstinate, and would not believe his own eyes if they told him anything different from what he had been saying before his eyes spoke. So while the master was writing, lying is very wrong, and liars must be caned. It is all for their own good on the blackboard for Edmund to copy out 700 times. Edmund sneaked out of school and ran for his life across the town to warn his granny, but she was not at home. So then he made off through the back door of the town, and raced up the hill to tell the Cockatrice and ask for his help. It never occurred to him that the Cockatrice might not believe him. You see, he had heard so many wonderful tales from him and had believed them all, and when you believe all a person's stories they ought to believe yours. This is only fair. At the mouth of the Cockatrice's cave Edmund stopped, very much out of breath, to look back at the town. As he ran he had felt his little legs tremble and shake, while the shadows of the great yellow cloud fell upon him. Now he stood once more between warm earth and blue sky, and looked down on the green plain dotted with fruit trees and red-roofed farms and plots of gold corn. In the middle of that plain the grey town lay, with its strong walls with the holes pierced for the arches, and its square towers with holes for dropping melted lead on the heads of strangers, its bridges and its steeples, the quiet river edged with willow and alder, and the pleasant green garden place in the middle of the town, where people sat on holidays to smoke their pipes and listen to the band. Edmund saw it all, and he saw, too, creeping across the plain, marking her way by a black line as everything withered at her touch, the great yellow dragon, and he saw that she was many times bigger than the whole town. "Oh, my poor, dear granny," said Edmund, for he had a feeling heart, as I ought to have told you before. The yellow dragon crept nearer and nearer, licking her greedy lips with her long red tongue, and Edmund knew that in the school his master was still teaching earnestly and still not believing Edmund's tale the least little bit. "He'll jolly well have to believe it soon, anyhow," said Edmund to himself, and though he was a very tender-hearted boy, I think it only fair to tell you that he was this. I am afraid he was not as sorry as he ought to have been to think of the way in which his master was going to learn how to believe what Edmund said. Then the dragon opened her jaws wider and wider and wider. Edmund shut his eyes, for though his master was in the town, the amiable Edmund shrank from beholding the awful sight. When he opened his eyes again there was no town, only a bare place where it had stood, and the dragon licking her lips and curling herself up to go to sleep, just as Kitty does when she has quite finished with a mouse. Edmund gasped once or twice, and then ran into the cave to tell the Cockatrice. "Well," said the Cockatrice thoughtfully, when the tale had been told. "What then?" "I don't think you quite understand," said Edmund gently. The dragon has swallowed up the town. Does it matter? Said the cockatrice. But I live there, said Edmund blankly. Never mind, said the cockatrice, turning over in the pool of fire to warm its other side, which was chilly, because Edmund had, as usual, forgotten to close the cave door. You can live here with me. I'm afraid I haven't made my meaning clear, said Edmund patiently. You see, my granny is in the town, and I can't bear to lose my granny like this. I don't know what a granny may be, said the cockatrice, who seemed to be growing weary of the subject, but if it's a possession to which you attach any importance. Of course it is, said Edmund, losing patience at last. Oh, do help me. What can I do? If I were you, said his friend, stretching itself out in the pool of flame so that the waves covered him up to his chin, I should find the drakeling and bring it here. But why? Said Edmund. He had gotten into the habit of asking why at school, and the master had always found it trying. As for the cockatrice, he was not going to stand that sort of thing for a moment. Oh, don't talk to me, he said, splashing angrily in the flames. I give you advice, take it or leave it, I shan't bother about you any more. If you bring the drakeling here to me, I'll tell you what to do next. If not, not. And the cockatrice drew the fire up close around his shoulders, tucked himself up in it, and went to sleep. Now this was exactly the right way to manage Edmund, only no one had ever thought of trying to do it before. He stood for a moment looking at the cockatrice. The cockatrice looked at Edmund out of the corner of his eye and began to snore very loudly, and Edmund understood, once and for all, that the cockatrice wasn't going to put up with any nonsense. He respected the cockatrice very much from that moment, and set off at once to do exactly as he was told, for perhaps the first time in his life. Though he had played truant so often, he knew one or two things that perhaps you don't know, though you have always been so good and gone to school regularly. For instance, he knew that a drakeling is a dragon's baby, and he felt sure that what he had to do was to find the third of the three noises that people used to hear coming from the mountains. Of course, the clucking had been the cockatrice, and the big noise like a large gentleman asleep after dinner had been the big dragon. So the smaller rumbling must have been the drakeling. He plunged boldly into the caves and searched and wandered and searched, and at last he came to a third door in the mountain, and on it was written "The baby is asleep." Just before the door stood 50 pairs of copper shoes, and no one could have looked at them for a moment without seeing what sort of feet they were made for each shoe had 5 holes in it for the drakeling's 5 claws. And there were 50 pairs because the drakeling took after his mother, and had 100 feet, no more and no less. He was the kind called Dracocentipedes in the learned books. Edmund was a good deal frightened, but he remembered the grim expression of the cockatrice's eye, and the fixed determination of his snore still rang in his ears, in spite of the snoring of the drakeling, which was, in itself, considerable. He screwed up his courage, flung the door open, and called out, "Hello, you drakeling. Get out of bed this minute." The drakeling stopped snoring and said sleepily, "It ain't time yet. Your mother says you are too, anyhow, and look sharp about it. What's more," said Edmund, gaining courage from the fact that the drakeling had not yet eaten him. The drakeling sighed, and Edmund could hear it getting out of bed. The next moment it began to come out of its room and to put on its shoes. It was not nearly so big as its mother, only about the size of a Baptist chapel. "Hurry up," said Edmund, as it fumbled clumsily with the 17th shoe. "Mother said I was never to go out without my shoes, said the drakeling, so Edmund had to help it to put them on. It took some time, and was not a comfortable occupation. At last the drakeling said it was ready, and Edmund, who had forgotten to be frightened, said, "Come on then," and they went back to the cockatrice. The cave was rather narrow for the drakeling, but it made itself thin, as you may see a fat worm do when it wants to get through a narrow crack in a piece of hard earth. "Here it is," said Edmund, and the cockatrice woke up at once and asked the drakeling very politely to sit down and wait. "Your mother will be here presently," said the cockatrice, stirring up its fire. The drakeling sat down and waited, but it watched the fire with hungry eyes. "I beg your pardon," it said at last, "but I am always accustomed to having a little basin of fire as soon as I get up, and I feel rather faint. Might I?" It reached out a claw toward the cockatrice's basin. "Certainly not," said the cockatrice sharply. "Where were you brought up? Did they never teach you that we must not ask for all we see?" "I beg your pardon," said the drakeling humbly, "but I am really very hungry." The cockatrice beckoned Edmund to the side of the basin and whispered in his ear so long and so earnestly that one side of the dear boy's hair was quite burnt off. And he never once interrupted the cockatrice to ask why. But when the whispering was over, Edmund, whose heart, as I may have mentioned, was very tender, said to the drakeling, "If you are really hungry, poor thing, I can show you where there is plenty of fire." And off he went through the caves, and the drakeling followed. When Edmund came to the proper place he stopped. There was a round iron thing in the floor, like the ones the men shoot the coals down into your cellar, only much larger. Edmund heaved it up by a hook that stuck out at one side, and a rush of hot air came up that nearly choked him. But the drakeling came close and looked down with one eye and sniffed, and said, "That smells good, eh?" "Yes," said Edmund, "well, that's the fire in the middle of the earth. There's plenty of it, all done to a turn. You'd better go down and begin your breakfast, hadn't you?" So the drakeling wriggled through the hole, and began to crawl faster and faster down the slanting shaft that leads to the fire in the middle of the earth. And Edmund, doing exactly as he had been told, for a wonder, caught the end of the drakeling's tail and ran the iron hook through it so that the drakeling was held fast. And it could not turn around and wriggle up again to look after its poor tail, because, as everyone knows, the way to the fires below is very easy to go down, but quite impossible to come back on. There is something about it in Latin, beginning, facilis descensus. So there was the drakeling, fast by the silly tail of it, and there was Edmund very busy and important and very pleased with himself, hurrying back to the cockatrice. "Now," said he. "Well, now," said the cockatrice. "Go to the mouth of the cave and laugh at the dragon so that she hears you." Edmund very nearly said why. But he stopped in time, and instead, said, "She won't hear me." "Oh, very well," said the cockatrice. "No doubt you know best," and he began to tuck himself up again in the fire, so Edmund did as he was bid. And when he began to laugh his laughter echoed in the mouth of the cave till it sounded like the laughter of a whole castle full of giants. And the dragon, lying asleep in the sun, woke up and said very crossly, "What are you laughing at?" "At you," said Edmund, and went on laughing. The dragon bore it as long as she could, but, like everyone else, she couldn't stand being made fun of. So presently she dragged herself up the mountain very slowly, because she had just had a rather heavy meal, and stood outside and said, "What are you laughing at?" in a voice that made Edmund feel as if he should never laugh again. Then the good Cockatrice called out, "At you! You've eaten your own drakeling, swallowed it with the town. Your own little drakeling. He, he. Ha, ha, ha." And Edmund found the courage to cry ha, ha, which sounded like tremendous laughter in the echo of the cave. "Dear me," said the dragon. "I thought the town stuck in my throat rather. I must take it out, and look through it more carefully." And with that she coughed, and choked, and there was the town, on the hillside. Edmund had run back to the Cockatrice, and it had told him what to do. So before the dragon had time to look through the town again for her drakeling, the voice of the drakeling itself was heard howling miserably from inside the mountain, because Edmund was pinching its tail as hard as he could in the round iron door, like the one where the men pour the coals out of the sacks into the cellar. And the dragon heard the voice and said, "Why, whatever's the matter with baby? He's not here." And made herself thin, and crept into the mountain to find her drakeling. The Cockatrice kept on laughing as loud as it could, and Edmund kept on pinching, and presently the great dragon, very long and narrow she had made herself, found her head where the round hole was with the iron lid. Her tail was a mile or two off, outside the mountain. When Edmund heard her coming he gave one last nip to the drakeling's tail, and then heaved up the lid and stood behind it, so that the dragon could not see him. Then he loosed the drakeling's tail from the hook, and the dragon peeped down the hole just in time to see her drakeling's tail disappear down the smooth, slanting shaft with one last squeak of pain. Whatever may have been the poor dragon's other faults, she was an excellent mother. She plunged headfirst into the hole, and slid down the shaft after her baby. Edmund watched her head go, and then the rest of her. She was so long, now she had stretched herself thin, that it took all night. It was like watching a goods train go by in Germany. When the last joint of her tail had gone, Edmund slammed down the iron door. He was a kind-hearted boy, as you have guessed, and he was glad to think that dragon and drakeling would now have plenty to eat of their favorite food, forever and ever. He thanked the Cockatrice for his kindness, and got home just in time to have breakfast and get to school by 9. Of course, he could not have done this if the town had been in its old place by the river in the middle of the plain, but it had taken root on the hillside just where the dragon left it. "Well," said the master, "where were you yesterday?" Edmund explained, and the master at once caned him for not speaking the truth. "But it is true," said Edmund. "Why, the whole town was swallowed by the dragon. You know it was?" "Nonsense," said the master. "There was a thunderstorm and an earthquake, that's all." And he caned Edmund more than ever. "But," said Edmund, who always would argue, even in the least favorable circumstances, "how do you account for the town being on the hillside now, instead of by the river as it used to be?" "It was always on the hillside," said the master. And all the class said the same, for they had more sense than to argue with a person who carried a cane. "But look at the maps," said Edmund, who wasn't going to be beaten in argument, whatever he might be in the flesh. The master pointed to the map on the wall. There was the town, on the hillside. And nobody but Edmund could see that of course the shock of being swallowed by the dragon had upset all the maps and put them wrong. And then the master caned Edmund again, explaining that this time it was not for untruthfulness, but for his vexatious argumentative habits. This will show you what a prejudiced and ignorant man Edmund's master was, how different from the revered head of the nice school where your good parents are kind enough to send you. The next day Edmund thought he would prove his tale by showing people the cockatrice, and he actually persuaded some people to go into the cave with him, but the cockatrice had bolted himself in and would not open the door, so Edmund got nothing by that except a scolding for taking people on a wild goose chase. "A wild goose," said they, "is nothing like a cockatrice." And poor Edmund could not say a word, though he knew how wrong they were. The only person who believed him was his granny. But then she was very old and very kind, and had always said he was the best of boys. Only one good thing came of all this long story. Edmund has never been quite the same boy since. He does not argue quite so much, and he agreed to be apprenticed to a locksmith, so that he might one day be able to pick the lock of the cockatrice's front door, and learn some more of the things that other people don't know. But he's quite an old man now, and he hasn't gotten that door open yet. If you like this story, please subscribe.